In the current age of the Imperium, a single space marine walks beside Roboute Guilliman who does not fit. His name is Leetu. He is older than he should be, quieter than he should be, and he carries knowledge of the deep past that a normal Astartes has no business holding. The lore introduces him as a mystery and leaves him a mystery. An ancient warrior, origin uncertain, who simply appears at the Lord Commander's side and seems to understand things the rest of the Imperium forgot 10,000 years ago. Now say his name slowly. Le.II. 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 Write it the way an Imperial scribe would abbreviate a legion designation, and you get something that should not be possible. Le.II. Legion 2. The second. The first of the two erased Primarchs Legions, the one struck from every record under the Edict of Obliteration. What if the clue was never hidden in an archive at all?
What if it has been standing next to Guilliman this whole time, hiding in a name we were all told not to think about? A son of the Second Legion, walking in the open, kept secret by the one Primarch powerful enough to protect him. That is the theory. And I want to be honest with you from the first minute, because this audience does not reward people who pretend a guess is a fact. The name is not proof. The name is a door. What I am going to do across the next half hour is walk through that door carefully, lay out what the canon actually says about this warrior, and ask you to judge whether the strange shape of him fits the silhouette of an erased legion, or whether Games Workshop simply built an old loyalist and we are reading ghosts into a stamp on a shoulder plate. We are not going to re-argue whether the lost legions existed. They did. The Imperium admits that much. We are asking something narrower and stranger. We are asking what is standing in plain sight and why no one is allowed to wonder about it. So let us start with the man who does not fit. Before we go anywhere near the decode, pin 3 pronunciations, because this channel's audience corrects mistakes and they are right to. Le.II. Le.II. Guilliman, with a hard G, Gil-I-Man. And the word that hangs over this entire story, obliteration. Hold that word. It is going to matter more than any other in this script. Here is what the lore establishes about Le.II, and almost none of it is comfortable. He is ancient, not old by the standards of a veteran sergeant who has fought 3 centuries of crusade. Ancient in the way that means he predates things he should not predate. He carries an archaic bolt pistol, a weapon described as an M676 Union model, made before the Imperium ever signed its accord with Mars. Sit with that for a second. He is carrying a gun manufactured before the Mechanicum and the Emperor shook hands. His armor is a pale silver, beak-helmed pattern that does not match the chapters around him. And on that armor there is a small stamp, a designation, 2 letters and a number, the thing his entire name is built from. He knows things. That is the part the writers planted on purpose. And it is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up. He speaks about the deep past, the founding era, the gene craft, the people who stood in the Emperor's circle before the galaxy had ever heard the word Primarch, as though he was there, because, in the records, he was. The lore wraps him in deliberate ambiguity, gives him an origin marked open, and then sets him moving through the story like a man who has read the last page of a book everyone else is still on chapter 1 of. That is not an accident of writing. That is a writer leaving a thread hanging on purpose and daring you to pull it. And notice what kind of mystery the writers chose for him. They did not make him a riddle of motive, the way they make the Alpha Legion a riddle of motive. They did not make him a riddle of loyalty, the way half the Inquisition is a riddle of loyalty. They made him a riddle of origin. Of all the questions you could leave open about a character, what does he want? Whose side is he on? What is he planning? They left open the single question that, in this setting, is the most dangerous one a person can have unanswered. Where did you come from? And when? In a galaxy where two entire bloodlines were struck from history, specifically so that no one could answer that question about them, a warrior whose origin is deliberately blank is not a minor mystery. He is the exact shape of the wound the edict left behind.
Here's what the canon refuses to print plainly. Why a single proto-warrior from the dawn of the Imperium is still walking, still armed, still carrying the oldest secrets in human history in his head, and standing close to the one Primarch trying to rebuild the truth. The Codex is silent on the connection, but the data isn't. And the first piece of data is the name. So let us build the decode carefully and honestly, because the brief that started this investigation is right about one thing above all others. If I hand you the name as proof, you should stop listening to me. The name is not proof. Watch how thin it is, and how strong it is at the same time. Le.II. Read it phonetically and it splits into two syllables. Le.II. Le.II. Now do the thing an Imperial scribe does on every requisition slip, every muster roll, every casualty ledger in 10,000 years of bureaucracy. Abbreviate the word Legion to its first two letters and render the number in Imperial Roman. Le.II becomes Le.I. Legion 2, the second, written into a name and hidden in plain sound. And here is where the record contradicts itself, and I am going to put the contradiction on the table myself rather than let a comment section do it for me. Because the canon already decodes that stamp, and it does not decode it as Legion 2. The record corrects one detail, and it is the most important detail in this entire theory. In the established lore, the mark on Le.II's armor reads Le.II, and the in-universe meaning given to it is not a legion designation at all. He is described as a prototype legionary, one of the first successful templates of an enhanced warrior, created from the combined gene stock of the Emperor and a perpetual named Erda, in the era before that same technique was refined to make the Primarchs. Le.II is read by the lore as a prototype number on a prototype soldier. And to twist the knife further, that designation is widely understood to be a wink from the designers themselves, an Easter egg pointing back to a miniature games workshop released in 1985, an early, limited edition Space Marine figure that carried the code Le.II. So the honest version is this. The letters that the theory reads as Legion 2, the canon reads as Prototype 2. Same three characters, two completely different stories. So why are we still here? Why does this theory have legs at all once you concede the prototype reading? Because of two things the prototype reading does not erase, and they are the two things this whole investigation actually rests on. The first is character. The second is timing. The name was only ever the clue that made us look. The case is the man. But before we build the case, let us deal with the obvious objection that the name proves nothing, by reminding ourselves what Games Workshop actually does with names. Because they do not pick them at random, and the audience that watches this channel knows it. Consider the Primarch Lionel Johnson. His name is lifted from a real-world poet, Lionel Johnson, who wrote a poem called The Dark Angel, a poem about a man carrying a secret he cannot escape. And what is the entire mythology of the Dark Angels? A legion built around a secret it cannot escape. The name was the spoiler the whole time. Consider Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard. Corvus Corax is the literal Latin scientific name of the common raven. Consider Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands Primarch,
whose name simply means iron hands in Latin, who has iron hands, and who leads a legion called the Iron Hands. Consider Sly Marbo, the Catachan jungle ghost, whose name is one letter shuffle away from Rambo. These are not coincidences.
This is a company that has buried meaning inside names for 40 years as a private joke and a public clue. And they have trained their most attentive readers to look for exactly that. So here is the careful position. The name Le.II has a documented prototype meaning, and Games Workshop has a documented habit of hiding second meanings inside names that already have a first one. Both of those things are true at once. A character built to be mysterious, given a name that already chimes with the most famous erasure in the setting, is precisely the kind of object this company has trained us to read twice. That does not make the second reading true. It makes it worth investigating. So let us investigate the man, and leave the name where it belongs, as the thing that made us look, not the thing that closes the case. What would a survivor of the Second Legion actually look like if one were still walking? Strip away the name entirely. Build the silhouette from scratch.
He would be ancient, because the Second's erasure happened in the Dawn era, the age of the Great Crusade and before. So any true son of that line would have to be a relic of a vanished time. He would be quiet about his origin, because his origin is the single most forbidden subject in Imperial history, a thing struck from every record under penalty of total erasure. So silence would not be a personality trait, it would be survival. He would carry knowledge no living Astartes should hold, because he would remember an Imperium that the rest of the galaxy has been forbidden to remember. And he would attach himself to power, because a living relic of an erased legion cannot survive alone in a galaxy that hunts its own forgotten history. He would need a protector. He would need the strongest protector there is. Now look at Leetu against that template, point for point. Ancient, confirmed. He carries pre-Mars Accord weaponry and speaks of the founding era as memory.
Quiet about his origin, confirmed. The Lord deliberately leaves his origin open and wraps him in ambiguity. Carries forbidden deep past knowledge, confirmed. He understands things the Imperium forgot 10,000 years ago. Attached to power. This is the claim the theory makes. The warrior at the Lord Commander's side. 4 boxes. The template the cohort has already validated as compelling. The ancient son of an erased line, walking among us. And Leetu fits the outline so cleanly that the writers either did it on purpose or built the exact same silhouette by accident. And this is where I have to keep myself honest again, because the audience asked the obvious question before I could finish the sentence. If Leetu is so clearly a relic of the lost era, why does the canon attach him to the heresy, to Erda, to the perpetuals, rather than handing us a clean scene of him standing at Guilliman's shoulder in the current age? That is a fair hit. The documented Leetu spends his most important canon moments in the dawn of the Imperium, not the present day. The image of him beside Guilliman now is the theory reaching forward, taking a character built for the deep past and asking whether his story is finished. So let me be precise. What the canon gives us is a warrior from the founding era who survived into ages he had no business surviving into. What the theory adds is the question of where a survivor like that would end up and whose side he would choose if he were still walking when the Lord Commander returned. The canon supplies the relic. The theory supplies the destination. Keep those two things separate in your head and the case stays clean. Because here is the strangest fact in Leetu's documented history, and it is the one that makes the survival plausible. The lore does not just call him old. It puts him at the absolute foundation of everything. He is described as sworn to protect a perpetual Erda, the geneticist whose own gene stock was combined with the Emperor's to make the Primarchs in the first place.
He considers the Emperor and Erda something like parents, because he was made from their craft before the craft made the demigods. Do you understand what that means? It means Leetu is not the son of a Primarch. He is older than the Primarchs. He is a prototype of the process that built them. And if you are looking for a being who could carry the deepest secrets of the setting, who was in the room, so to speak, before any of it happened, you could not design a better candidate than a successful prototype who outlived the experiment. The Codex is silent on what a prototype like that would know about the legions that came after. But think about the position he occupies. If two of those legions were so dangerous, or so disastrous, or so loyal in a way that became inconvenient, that the Emperor personally struck them from history, then the people most likely to know why are the people who stood at the foundation. Erda knew. The Emperor knew. And Erda's sworn guardian, made from the same gene craft, walking at her side through the dawn of the Imperium. He is exactly the kind of witness who would carry the answer in his head and have every reason in the galaxy to never say it out loud. And consider what happened to Erda, because it sharpens everything about her guardian. Erda was the mother of the Primarchs in every sense that matters. Her gene stock combined with the Emperor's to make the demigods. She did not trust the future the Emperor was building for her sons.
So she did the unthinkable. While the Primarchs were still infants in their pods, she caused the warp vortex that scattered them across the galaxy, tearing the Emperor's grand design apart at the root. She was, in other words, the single person who knew the most about the Primarch project and trusted it the least. And then she vanished into hiding for the rest of the long age that followed, carrying the whole secret of the gene craft with her, and at her side, the entire time, the prototype she was given to guard. If you want to understand why Leetu carries forbidden knowledge, stop looking at Leetu and look at who he was made to protect. He spent the foundational era standing next to the one being who understood the demigods better than the Emperor's own propaganda ever would. Whatever Erda knew about how the project went wrong, about why two of those sons became things that had to be unmade, her guardian was in the room for it. That is, the witness the theory says is still walking.
Not a soldier who heard a rumor. A guardian who stood beside the source. Which brings us to the cover-up, and to the brother strong enough to keep it. The audience put this one on the table directly. The Lord Commander would keep the secret, and I think the in-universe logic is airtight, whatever you decide about Leetu specifically. Roboute Guilliman is the most powerful living being in the Imperium, short of the Emperor on the throne. He was resurrected after 10,000 years, by the gene craft of Belisarius Call and the power of a dying god, and he came back into a galaxy that had buried its own history under 10,000 years of superstition and lies. And what does the lore tell us he did about that? He went looking for the truth.
In Dark Imperium, Guy Haley writes him as a Primarch quietly tormented by how little of the real record survives. A son trying to reconstruct 10,000 years of obscured history, founding an entire order of archivists, his historiators, just to claw back the facts the Imperium had drowned in myth. Now put a living witness to the founding in front of that man. A warrior who remembers the Dawn era as memory, not legend. A relic of the exact period Guilliman is desperate to understand. What does the Lord Commander do? He does not hand that witness to the Inquisition, who would dissect him. He does not announce him to the High Lords, who would erase him to protect the lie. He keeps him close. He shelters him. Because Guilliman has met his father, governs the Imperium, and has the personal power to protect anyone he chooses, and the single safest place in the entire galaxy for a forbidden truth
is at the side of the one Primarch strong enough to refuse every authority that would come to take it. The Imperium has been hiding the answer for 10,000 years. The theory's claim is that it stopped hiding it the day Guilliman started walking with it. And here is the part of that claim I find genuinely hard to dismiss, even at my most skeptical. The safest hiding place for a forbidden thing is not a vault. A vault invites a search. A vault says, here is something worth taking. The safest hiding place is the open, unexplained, in front of everyone, labeled with a name no one is allowed to think too hard about. You do not bury the most dangerous witness in the Imperium under a mountain. You stand him next to the Lord Commander in plain armor with a stamp on his shoulder, and you let 10,000 years of trained obedience do the rest. No one searches for what they have been taught not to wonder about. And there is a second reason the side of Guilliman, specifically, is the perfect hiding place. Not just because of his power, but because of his reputation. Guilliman is the rational one, the administrator, the Primarch who rebuilt civilization with codes and charts and supply lines. He is the last son anyone in the Imperium would suspect of harboring a heretical secret, because his entire brand is order and transparency and the rule of law. A Primarch like Magnus hiding an ancient warrior would set off every alarm in the Inquisition. Everyone expects the sorcerer to keep forbidden things. But the avenging son? The man who founded an order of archivists to drag the truth back into the light.
If he keeps one witness off the record, no one even looks. Because the keeping of secrets is the last thing his reputation would lead you to expect. The most honest brother is the perfect place to hide the one thing the Imperium cannot afford to have known. And the audience already worked out the in-universe logic before the lore ever spelled it out. The Lord Commander would keep the secret, because the Lord Commander is the only one who could. There is a moment in this audience's history that the channel has decided to remember, even when the Imperium would rather it forgot. The recurring reading that the lost legions were not erased for failure or betrayal, but for something stranger in their very nature. A viewer thread that this cohort lit up over raised the pariah question, that one or both of the missing legions carried a blank, a null, a gene line that read as absence rather than presence. And the theory asks us to lay that reading over Leetu and see if it fits. His quietness, his apartness, the way the lore describes him as unsettling, as standing slightly outside the warriors around him. Could that be the blank in him, the null nature theorized for the lost lines, leaking through? I have to slow down here because this is the most speculative layer of an already speculative theory, and the audience deserves the honest version. There is nothing in the canon that marks Leetu as a pariah. Nothing. His documented origin is gene stock from the Emperor and a perpetual, a lineage about presence and endurance, not absence. So the null reading of Leetu is inference stacked on inference, a hypothesis laid over a character who was never written as a blank. Keep it on the table because the brief asks us to, and because the audience raised it honestly, but keep it flagged. This is the part where, if you walked away believing only one thing, it should be that no one has confirmed this, and the records do not support it.
But the brief raises one point on the null question that is genuinely sharp, and it is worth stating precisely because it cuts against the obvious refutation. The standard way to shut down a lost Primarch theory is to say the gene seed was tested and came back clean. No markers. Case closed. Except, and follow this carefully, if a being carried a null nature, a blank in the gene line, then a gene test would not return a Primarch signature. It would return absence. It would return nothing. And nothing is exactly what a clean test looks like. So nothing found is not the refutation people think it is. For a pariah line, nothing found is the signature. I am not telling you that proves Le.II is a blank. I am telling you that the easiest way people try to close this case does not actually close it, and an audience that thinks carefully about genecraft already knows why. So weigh it.
On one side, a deliberately mysterious ancient warrior, written with an open origin, carrying forbidden knowledge, attached to the one power that could shelter him, with a name that chimes against the most famous erasure in the setting, in a franchise that hides meaning in names as a matter of habit. On the other side, the documented, sober reading. He is a prototype legionary, Le.II, Erda's sworn guardian, an Easter egg to a miniature from 1985, an ancient loyalist and nothing more, and the Legion II decode is a coincidence of English phonetics that the in-universe etymology does not support. Both of those columns are real. I am not going to pretend the second one is empty because it is not. It might be the whole truth. The disciplined position is to hold both and let the shape of the man tip you one way or the other. Now the hardest objection of all, the one that should bother you if nothing else has. If this is a secret, why is he on the page at all? Why would writers who want to preserve a mystery hand us a character who is, on the theory's own terms, the answer, walking around in the open? And the answer is the same answer in the fiction and outside it, which is exactly why it is so unsettling. In universe, the best place to hide a forbidden truth is in plain sight, unexplained, where everyone can see it and no one is permitted to ask. And out of universe, the writers do precisely the same thing. They put a strange, ancient warrior with an evocative name into the story, give him an origin marked open, let him carry the weight of the deep past, and then say nothing. They do not confirm. They do not deny. They leave the thread hanging exactly where you can see it, knowing that the most attentive readers will pull it, and that the pulling is the point. What the canon refuses to say next is not an absence. It is the bait. The silence around Le.II is doing work. It is the same silence the Imperium keeps around the 2nd and the 11th. A deliberate, manufactured quiet that tells you something is there precisely by refusing to describe it. And this is where the theory stops being only about one warrior and becomes about how the whole setting hides its deepest truths. The Edict of Obliteration removed the names of the 2 lost legions from every record. The Imperium has a phrase for that kind of erasure, and it is worth saying in full because the phrase itself is a confession. Damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Not the condemnation of a crime, the condemnation of remembering. The Imperium did not merely punish the 2nd and the 11th, it made it a crime to recall that they had ever been. And historians in the setting describe this particular erasure as the most successful one ever carried out in all of Imperial history. Sit with that ranking. In 10,000 years of an empire built on lies and selective memory, the single most thorough act of forgetting it ever achieved was aimed at 2 of its own loyal legions. But the edict removed the names. It did not remove the fact of them. We know they existed. There is a leaked fragment, an accidental printing in, of all things, a common infantryman's primer that places the 2nd and the 11th in the campaigns of the Rangdan Xenocides in the Dawn era, fighting the worst Xenos threat the early Imperium ever faced. One clerical error, one misprinted page slipped into a soldier's pocketbook, and the perfect erasure cracks. That is the lesson the setting keeps teaching about its own secrets.
They are never quite as buried as the Imperium believes. And notice the other tell in that fragment. The lost legions are recorded separately from the traitors.
The 9 legions that betrayed the Emperor kept their names. Horus, Angron, Magnus, all of them, named and illustrated and sold to you on model boxes. Only the 2 that did not betray him were erased. You do not delete your enemies and preserve them at the same time. The Imperium remembered the men who tried to overthrow its god and forgot the 2 who didn't. That is not how shame works. That is how fear works. Whatever the 2nd and the 11th were, the Emperor was more frightened of their memory than of his own traitors' names. The edict removed the name. It did not remove the body. And if it could not fully erase the fact that they fought, then it is at least conceivable that it could not fully erase everyone who came from them. Erasure is a record-keeping act. It scrubs the archive. It does not, by itself, reach into the present and unmake a living thing that walks beyond the reach of the ledger. That is the whole shape of the case, and I want to lay it out as a sequence so you can see where it is iron and where it is glass. Iron. The lost legions existed and were deliberately erased. Canon. Iron. Le.II is ancient, mysterious, carries forbidden knowledge, and is written with a deliberately open origin. Canon. Iron. Guilliman is the one figure with the power, the motive, and the documented hunger for lost history to shelter a living witness from the Dawn era. Canon. Reasoned. Iron. Games Workshop hides meaning in names as a matter of habit. Documented. Glass. The Le.II stamp means Legion 2 rather than Prototype 2, unconfirmed, and contradicted by the in-universe reading. Glass. Le.II is a son of the 2nd specifically rather than an ancient loyalist of no legion at all, unconfirmed. Glass. The present-day scene of him at Guilliman's side as a deliberate cover-up, the theory's extension, not canon. The iron is real, the glass is glass. An honest viewer keeps them in separate hands. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a warrior who is, beyond any dispute, one of the most quietly loaded characters in the modern setting. A prototype from before the Primarchs. A guardian of the woman whose blood made them. A survivor of an age the Imperium has spent 10,000 years trying to forget. Given a name that rings like a legion number in a company that loves to ring names like that. Whether that name is a clue or a coincidence, Games Workshop has built a figure who stands exactly where a forbidden truth would stand if a forbidden truth were going to walk in the open. They may simply intend him as an ancient loyalist. And the 2nd Legion reading may be nothing but fans hearing a legion in 2 syllables. State that plainly, because it is the most likely answer and the audience deserves to hear it said without flinching. But state the other thing too. The setting was built by people who hide their deepest answers in their most obvious places, who buried a Primarch's entire secret in a poet's name 40 years ago and waited to see who would notice. So when one of them puts an ancient, silent, deep-knowing warrior beside the Lord Commander and stamps a legion-shaped sound onto his name, the disciplined thing is not to believe it. The disciplined thing is to refuse to stop wondering, which is the one thing the Imperium has spent 10,000 years trying to make impossible. The Imperium has spent 10,000 years hunting the 2nd Legion through burned archives, recut statues, and names no one is allowed to say. And the entire time, the answer may have been the easiest thing in the galaxy to find, easier than any archive, easier than any relic. You just had to say his name out loud. Le.II. 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 Legion 2. He stands in the open beside the most powerful man in the Imperium, ancient and quiet and carrying the deep past in his head, and the only reason no one has noticed is that no one was allowed to wonder.
The Second Legion didn't vanish into the warp. One of its sons may be standing right there, wearing his erased Legion as a name, kept secret by the one brother strong enough to keep him.